my next hard thing is 2. So I'm flexible.
Okay. That'd be cool.
Everything's gonna be fine.
We'll keep it saucy and tight. We'll do a tight 40 or something, 30 or whatever.
I like it. Perfect.
And then putting
what kind of conversation are we having?
Bio stuff in there. Mostly this is going to be about sports. This is kind of like a sports thing. That's what people want to hear about. I guess the first question really is for people that know and love you but haven't talked to you for a while or aren't around you, just how are you doing? Are you okay? Are you safe? Is everything okay? Is it cool in these horrible, difficult times?
This is an interesting year to say the least, and it's been undoubtedly challenging for very many who have faced tremendous loss, personal, financial, professional, but we're relatively safe. I'm now teaching at the University of Minnesota Mankato, and I'll tell you what, a city of 50,000 outside of a large metro area is not a bad place to ride out a pandemic. We have lots of space out here. We have a big yard. My daughter's been able to get out and play when the weather was better. I'm not bad. And I think the interesting thing is, despite how chaotic this year has been, how disruptive this year has been, you look at things like the live music sector, you look at the changes happening in higher ed, so many different things. There's a lot of people being super creative, and you can already see the sea change of what the future of music is, what the future of entertainment is, what the future of some of our economic and societal models will look like in the future. It's starting to move, and I think by and large it's moving in good places.
Yeah, that leads me into one of my few kind of like prepared questions for you. I've always been so impressed by your ability to both kind of recognize but also communicate trends that are happening in the music business, in the art world, and just kind of life in general, and in higher ed. Where were we? I'm interested to kind of get your perspective on where you think we were headed maybe before the pandemic. So like in the spring, like where were trends kind of like pushing us? And then how is that kind of like either in what are the most significant ways that has changed? And then also kind of like what are the trends that you're seeing these days kind of that are striking to you?
Sure. So I think there's wide agreement now that at least initially what we've seen, COVID has been acting as a huge accelerator, right? COVID has been accelerating and amplifying challenges that were already inherent in a whole bunch of businesses. And it's amplifying and highlighting the potential that people were already pursuing at smaller levels in other facets of society. You can take, for example, physical retail has been challenged for some time, right? Physical retail is expensive. Physical retail has leases and humans and heating and so many other things involved. And there had already been ways to purchase products digitally through Amazon or buying direct from your favorite retailer, potentially at some sort of discount because they didn't have to overcome, having a fleet of stores and all of those other things everywhere. So, we roll into the pandemic and people aren't going out. We're in lockdown. We suddenly have a huge facet of society relying on mail order items. I think Target's mail order business picked up an order of 300% within the first month or two after the pandemic really sat in March and April. And we've seen a raft of companies filing for bankruptcy. Brooks Brothers, J. Crew, and a host of others. And not to minimize the importance of those events, the job losses and other things entwined, we knew that physical retail was already challenged, right? Meanwhile, on the opposite side, on sort of the optimistic side, we've been talking about the power that the internet has for greater and greater global distribution and also more meaningful and direct fan to artist or fan to brand relationships, right? You can go direct to fan with the internet. Well, we're seeing that in spades. People are launching live streams tied directly to Venmo accounts, doing limited edition merch for this live stream or this initiative. I'm seeing artists that are normally playing, 1,500 capacity or 2,000 capacity rooms doing live streams and getting 50, 60,000 viewers, right? Tremendous potential. I don't know what the numbers are for Billie Eilish's show on Friday, and I don't know if you watched it, but it was incredible. And it's interesting, I've been talking to a lot of friends, we're all wondering about what the future of live music is. Live music is a powerful, powerful and inspiring art form, and it's on hiatus right now. Lots of people are talking about, is this live music's internet moment or Napster moment? Well, prior to COVID, there's been major artists like Coldplay, like Radiohead, and others questioning the cost of major global tours, questioning the environmental and carbon footprint involved in major global tours, and wondering, is there a better way to do this? And I've been talking with friends wondering, when is someone either not going to tour or can't because of COVID? When are they just going to take over a giant soundstage and deliver us something amazing? Well, that's what Billie Eilish did Friday. There were unannounced guests. There was incredible visuals. There was graphics. There was virtual reality or extended reality aspects to the performance. Parts of it reminded me of the Innocence and Experience tour that U2 did, where they dropped the screen into the center of the stadium rather than an end of the stadium, which meant that no one had a kill seat. Everybody was close to the action. But as the show progressed, the band was actually able to walk into the screen between panels of it and almost immerse themselves in the graphic and in the animation that was happening on the big screens. It was really exciting. Well, Billie Eilish and her crew did that times 10 Friday. And you look at the creative potential of building an environment, building an experience, and then beaming it worldwide. There's wide recognition. That's not going away. When you're a small artist, a 1,500 capacity artist, and you can play to 55,000, that's not going to go away. That doesn't minimize an artist or a fan's desire to be in that room and to feel the energy and all of that. But we're starting to see a lot of trends around what's possible in a live stream, what's possible in digital delivery for a variety of products and services against the backdrop of changing retail. And to keep going, when the pandemic hit, I was really looking forward to the new James Bond film, right? Well, that was delayed until April, and then that was delayed again until November. And I started tweeting, like, when is the, I will pay $50 today to watch that from my house, or I'll pay $100 today to watch that from my house. When are we really going to unravel and decouple the power of film from the model of you have to go to a theater in a suburban mall and this is how that works? Well, we saw, I think one of the first big experiments was the second Trolls movie was beamed direct to households. And guess what? With an 8-year-old, and we hadn't left the house in 5 weeks, you better believe we paid the $20 or $25, whatever that was, to watch it from home. Thought it was great. We did the same with Mulan. And Variety just reported 2 days ago that it looks like there's a bidding war right now. Several major platforms, Apple and Netflix are mentioned, are looking at buying the new James Bond movie direct and pulling it out of theaters. Meanwhile, what did Regal do? Regal is the number 2 theater chain in the United States. They were counting on blockbuster money at the end of the year. They were hoping, hey, we'll have some protocols, we'll have limited seating, but by golly, somebody give us a blockbuster like James Bond. Let's have that open in November, and at least we've got some cash to sort of mitigate the pain that the first half of the year was in. Well, when they punted the Bond film into 2021, Regal just said, that's it. We were counting on that cash without it, and they closed something like 7,000 theaters a week ago.
Right.
But we've already been Netflixing from home for 5, 6, 7 years. We've already been seeing some films like The Irishman debut on Netflix, or critical Emmy-winning shows debut on Amazon or HBO, not NBC, not CBS. So we're seeing an acceleration of the potential of direct-to-fan, and also an acceleration of our traditional media companies aren't what we thought they were anymore. Apple's not a technology company giving us shiny devices. They're becoming a full-on content studio, with Tom Hanks movies and television shows and all kinds of content. And the same from Amazon and Google and others. I think it's interesting, BMG, and I know I'm rambling, BMG is a record company in Germany. They just bought a concert promotion company to bring that aspect of the business in-house. And I think that's where we're starting to go. What we used to call record labels they're going to look like record companies and promotion machines and distributors and live promoters, and they're going to do it all. They're going to do a one-stop shop, and it's not going to be a one-stop shop as a money grab. It's going to be, we're going to offer these services because our clients and our artist partners need these services. And you're also going to see Apple and Netflix and everybody else do the same thing. I mean, we're leaving what were all these unique, diversified, and stratified businesses, and this is entertainment. This is content. This is communication and culture. It's all one big business.
It's interesting, that what you talk about with Apple being basically kind of controlling the whole stream, or the, kind of being, I don't remember what the name for it is, but basically just owning the whole pipeline, like basically creating the hardware and creating the content on there. I mean, for artists, I think one of the big thing that's kind of like in our way a lot of times from making money on our music is that we don't have as much control over the final interaction between us and our audience. Even if we are doing live streams and those kinds of things, like having to go through YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, and then when we make albums and we're publishing them, we're having to deal with Spotify and Apple Music and kind of going through that bottleneck. I was talking to Fabian Almazan, who heads the Biophilia record label, a few weeks ago, and he was talking about, I basically just asked him, like, how do we make this work? Like, with streaming basically giving us like a micro fraction of a cent for every stream of our music, how does this end up working out that this can be equitable for artists? And he was, he surprisingly said, I don't expect people to basically pay for music that they can get for free in what is like a legitimate process. So I don't know how that works out. I mean, what's your take on streaming? And maybe I said some things there that you also want to comment on or disagree with, but what's your take on this? Like, Spotify has like $1 billion valuation or multi-billion-dollar valuation, and artists who are maybe getting a reasonable amount of streams are getting paid like $7 or something a month.
Well, a couple of things. Spotify's not breaking the law. Spotify is paying out rates that have been federally established. And if this year, of all years, teaches us anything about political machinations and what's the role of government and what's the role of an informed citizenry, it's time to get involved, right? Congress sets copyright royalty rates. And who are the people in your district? Who are the people in your state that are making those decisions? Are they listening to you, and are they understanding the economic impact of music? I'm continually frustrated that I don't think we realize there's still that misperception among older generations that, music and artists, that's a sideshow. If you tell any older relative what you do, oh, so you play at the club or you play at the bar and there's a tip jar, and well, that's a piece of it. But Minneapolis and St. Paul over the last couple of years have started doing a creativity index to look what the creative economy generates within the state and within that metro region. And they've been doing the study every 2 years, so I think the last numbers that were out were 2018, and Minneapolis's creativity index was something on the order of $5.4 billion. Right, I could pull up the PDF and tell you that. Now, to be fair, that's the arts, that's music, but that's also advertising, that's production, that's local television, that's a whole host of creative things. But by golly, $5.4 billion. That's more than all of Minnesota's professional sports teams generate. But we will subsidize a stadium, right? But then criticize artists. And also, you look at the fate that some of our stages are facing. They can't have shows, they can't bring people in, and yet the federal government is not passing. Congress has passed and included a Save Our Stages bill with relief money for really some of the venues and some of the spaces that have helped build human culture, whether it's First Avenue or Shuba's or the Viper Room or the Bowery Ballroom or Birdland or, the Blue Note, you name it. These places are threatened. But many of our elected officials still don't see the value that brings. They fail to recognize that music is also a critical night infrastructure piece. You don't just go to a show. You often grab dinner with friends. You might even get drinks before dinner. If you're from outside the metro, you might also stay in a hotel to attend a show. So the economic impact of everything from local venues to something on the order of a Coachella is tremendous, right? And my understanding is if we add up all of our intellectual property-based exports in America, games, film, television, music, and some of law that's working around IP-related issues, you're nearing 20% of U.S. GDP, right? Almost a fifth of America's economic output is humans making creative things. So if we want to take a role in that, if we want to have more agency and change what some of the rates are, we should do that. Now, there's a flip side. Music fans a music fan's main drive is to listen to music. It was never to buy it, right? The opportunity to buy music just became the easiest way for a music fan to listen to their favorite music, right? So musical enjoyment doesn't have to inherently require a purchase agreement somewhere therein, right? You can look at the, retaining popularity of radio, right? Anytime someone criticizes streaming payouts, well, any individual radio station has a minuscule payout. But in aggregate, if we take all radio stations and if we use our collection agencies, ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, GMR now, on the digital side, everybody else, it's a much different number, right? And if, we're only now starting to crest on Spotify and Apple Music, that 100 million listener threshold. Well, radio has that daily in just the United States, right? We will see more money into people's pockets when more people are streaming. And that is the new radio station today. That is the new distribution mechanism. And as a music fan, I would never want to get rid of that. I'd love it if there were more tiers. Give me a higher def tier, have more of a tiered business model like Tidal does. But you look at all the other ways that artists can monetize. I don't worry as much about streaming royalty rates, right? We all get involved and we elect the officials. They're going to see the value of our output and we change the laws, or we improvise, which we've always known to do. You know, you look at what Bandcamp has done doing those royalty free Fridays. I think the very first Friday they did that, they set a record and generated 6 point something million on one day with 100% of the proceeds going to artists. Okay, let's get more people on that tip. And I think we're about to see an explosion in the potential of artists to control their own live streams, collect their own tip jars through Venmos and other services, and really have a lot more ways to make more money. And the interesting thing is, if we really explore those avenues, we're also breaking that old system that wasn't necessarily better when all you're doing is offsetting liquor sales to try and drive 70 to 80% of your income from a live music perspective. So I don't want to blame anybody in the ecosystem, and I don't want to upset an apple cart over fairness, but I think there is still plenty of potential. What's different today, and this is partly due to everybody having the capacity at home on a phone, on an iPad, or a laptop computer to make their art, is we have a lot more art, right? When I started getting involved in this business professionally 25 years ago, if I recall, the majors were putting out on order 30-some thousand albums a year, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the last number I saw was 40+ thousand songs per day are being uploaded into Spotify from one of Daniel Ek's last presentations. So we've got a horrifically flooded market. Okay, well, for some, again, I don't want to be critical. For some, the problem isn't Spotify's payout rate, it's obscurity. How do we help you overcome obscurity? How do you scale? How do you reach new marketplaces? And that's where really compelling tools like Chartmetric become interesting, right? You dive into something like Chartmetric where you can look at your own global listenership, you can look at similar artists to your world and your environment and start to realize like, okay, common sense tells me I should gig Chicago, but when I look at my own streaming data and geolocate it, I've got more fans in Sao Paulo than I do in Chicago. Maybe I should gig Sao Paulo. Maybe I should set up a live stream focused there. Maybe I should, stop hounding my local press and radio and reach out in a completely new direction. It's that old adage, work smarter, not harder. And again, I think there's tremendous potential. I had never heard the term microsync before this summer. Well, what's a microsync? You're not trying to get your song in a major Hollywood picture. You're getting it behind a buddy's TikTok who's starting to gain an audience. You're getting your music into somebody's, just off the ground podcast that's starting to develop an audience, where we really look at a much fuller perspective of where music and art can go. Apple doesn't think they're a computer company anymore, and our record companies don't think they're record companies anymore. Maybe we're not just musicians either, right? And we're finding different avenues for content in more and more places. I mean, this podcast, this conversation could go on for 10 hours and we could bring 100 people into it and we won't get any closer to solving it, but we would come up with 100 different directions to go and 100 different approaches to try. And I see so many artists communicating, and isn't that what music does? In so many unique ways, through film, through multimedia installations, through documentaries, through. I don't know. There's a lot of potential. That doesn't make it easier, but there's a lot of potential.
It's interesting because Spotify has been kind of like it seemed to me like the target for, especially in my world, like a lot of older, more established musicians feeling like Spotify was the thing that was like really ruining their life, their business, their livelihood. And I think for a lot of us, we've kind of thought of that as being the end game. Like, okay, everything was going to end up, we went from tapes to CDs to iTunes on the iPad, and now it's going to be Spotify streaming. And so like this is, and it's hard to see anything past that. So like this is going to be the battleground. We need to make all of our money on Spotify. But I think what you're saying, and what I'm also seeing in the world is like there are these other things kind of like past Spotify, or
right.
or that general kind of idea, or this one technology.
The future is streaming, but what are you going to stream? Is it just your song, or is it a hologram-based video? Is it an expanded reality live stream like Billie Eilish just did? Or is the stream a compelling show that you do from your house straight to somebody else's house, and you have some really unique fan engagements? I think Laura Marling was one of the first people. She took the tour that she had routed, to physical cities, and did a series of live stream, but geo-blocked anybody outside of the city that she was planning to play on or around that date anyway. Well, that gave her the opportunity to still then say, hey, Cleveland, how you doing? And to have a different level of fan interaction. Well, you could do that on a micro level and really change things up, the future is not Spotify. The future is a whole host of engaging, experiential, beamed content that then has a whole bunch of ways that you can monetize, not just, here's the per spin rate from Apple or from Spotify, but, you're buying unique merch, you're donating to the tip jar, there's unique fan interactive assets that can happen during that stream that grow the fan base. All of that is a lot deeper and a lot more exciting than Spotify. We'll still stream music. And you're right, Charlie, I think in some ways, since Spotify was the first big streaming platform, a lot of ire is directed towards them. But let's not forget that the original problem wasn't Spotify, it was Napster, and then Kazaa, and then Pirate Bay, and Apple with iTunes, and later Spotify with the paid tier, helped stop, in many ways, the peer-to-peer market, which was, it's hard to realize now, it was insane.
Right.
It was tens of billions of songs a month being traded illegally. Well, we've sort of plugged that hole in the dam. And so, now we're reorienting the ship. I also think there's still a reckoning that the initial business that you and I saw when we were younger in the 90s, that was a false positive. You were looking at the CD business, which exploded partially because of the replacement cycle that the CD did. Right? If you look at the data of what sold in the 90s, it wasn't just Nirvana, Smashing Pumpkins, and Britney Spears. It was, you bought your fourth copy of Dark Side of the Moon on CD. You bought Sgt. Pepper for the third time. You bought the expanded, remastered, limited edition Rudy Van Gelder Deluxe Plus version of Kinda Blue, right? So that big corporate perspective of business where labels were flush with cash and signed lots of people and spent big money and the studio infrastructure just grew up, everybody and their cousin had an SSL, that might have been a false indicator of where the real health of the business was. I think finally, and COVID is doing this, there's another exciting spirit of community and collaboration coming right now, right? So many artists can't play, so many artists have lost such a critical piece of what was their main revenue source. Well, okay, there's new coalitions forming, there's nonprofits jumping and forming and leaping into action. Many of our largest granting institutions have been willing to say, okay, in the near term, we're actually going to break our covenants for some fiscal prudency, and we're just going to give more money, right? I think we could see new labels, new cooperatives, new collaborations, new all kinds of things emerge that start to provide a much better, more balanced future perspective on the music industry. And I think it's interesting that, and I can't speak out of turn because there's so many things that I can't speak to, the power around the Black Lives Matter movement, which we all hope sincerely will not recede, will only grow because of its existing size and diverse support. But I was just on a series of diversity web streams that were sponsored by the Music Biz Association, American Composers Forum, and others. And there's a power in that movement that's not just looking at safety in the streets, but looking at fairness and equity in the boardroom and in the office. And, going through history and saying, how do we right some wrongs? Leonard Chess, wrote some criminal album or criminal record contracts 60, 70 years ago, and exploited that first big generation of black blues artists. Why haven't the major record companies changed the terms of those deals? Why haven't we reversed the payouts? And we've even taken some of those deal models and we've expanded it across the entire music ecosystem, right? Some label deals don't look that different than they did 70, 80 years ago. Isn't it time that stopped? Isn't it time that we take a lead from Bandcamp that says, hey, we'll take zero. We'll take zero once a month. I think there's a lot of interesting movement in that direction, and I've been inspired by how far some of those conversations are going. 5 years from now, this industry could be more inclusive. It could be more diverse. It could be more gender balanced. And the very basis of its business could be a lot fairer and a lot more equitable. Rolling Stone ran a great article that racism and exploitation was the original heart of the music business. The whole business model was exploitation. We're finally talking about it. We're finally recognizing it for what it was. I don't know. This year has been horrific on so many levels, and frustrating and lonely and exhausting and painful. And I don't know whether it's some of the enthusiasm we're seeing in early voter turnout and all kinds of other things. But there seems to be a lot of excitement. There seems to be a lot of momentum, and there seems to be all different. I've had to talk to my students about this, right? So we're locked in our houses, we're on Zoom for the classroom, and you have this mindset that, well, the whole world has stopped. No, it hasn't. Taylor Swift's putting out incredible music. Justin Bieber's putting out incredible music. Moses Sumney is putting out incredible music. The world is moving on, and there's a lot of momentum in a lot of places, which all suggests a better future for us and the next generation sooner rather than later. I don't want to, rest on hyperbole, but I feel like there's a sea change coming, and it's for the better.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, it has to go up, right? We have to go up from here, maybe.
And, talking to the in-laws, talking to parents, talking to elders, this is what 68 felt like for some in comparison. And you realize progress isn't always easy. Progress isn't always clean and smooth. And as we joked at the beginning, growth often comes from places of uncomfortability. We're all in that now, but what is it doing? It's making us have more conversations. You could say, well, we're zoomed out. Sure, but you're probably talking to more people globally than you ever have before, having a much healthier, broader perspective come to bear.
Yeah.
Right? Zoom and web communication on one level sucks, but at the other end, I've quintupled the number of outside guests coming into the classroom that can inspire my students, because it's a lot easier to get somebody to hop onto a Zoom than to come to Mankato at 9 a.m. on a Monday. Right? I mean, that's the interesting thing. I can't wait to get back in the classroom, but I will never stop using Zoom. I've learned so much about education and about the role of the classroom in the last 6 months that there are some things that I will never stop doing. In the same way, major artists will not stop doing live streams because there's real potential there. And you can tell I'm a teacher. I could keep talking about this for hours.
Well, I mean, I think it's all very exciting. I think the positive side of this, the opportunity, is all really exciting. I mean, what advice do you have for people that look at that whole spectrum of possibilities and feel very overwhelmed? Like feel like they maybe don't even have a full handle on, how to do things, how it has been in the past. And they're looking at this and saying like, okay, I can make music in these millions of different ways. I can build community in these hundreds of different ways and reach out. Like, how do people, like, what advice do you give your students? What advice do you give other people that come in and ask you like, I need some help. I need to kind of get like a first direction point, feeling like a little lost
Absolutely.
in the woods.
Well, I'm using, I'll use a talking point that I got from Dessa, a Minneapolis, now based in New York, artist, writer, and so much more. She came to McNally Smith years and years ago and reminded all the students in attendance, hey, the music business is two words. There's music and there's business. And art is a beautiful thing, and art is exploratory, and it's soul, and it's musicianship, and it's writing, and it's poetry, and it's all those things. And you can take a lifetime to get good at making art and expressing yourself. But if you want to derive revenue from it, if you want it to pay bills, well, you have to consider what's the business aspect, what's the commerce aspect of this. And any startup business takes time. Rome wasn't built in a day. And if we were going to talk about any more traditional business structure, you could sit down with a bank with a business plan that doesn't show profitability for a couple of years and no one would blink. That's expected. You've got a new restaurant, you've got a new store, you've got a new salon, you've got a new boutique of some sort. Well, it's going to take you 2 years to get the word out and to turn the numbers into the black. All artists need to have that perspective of time that it'll take to build something. I remember on a Sound Opinions program, Jim DeRogatis and Greg Cott had Ani DeFranco on, and they asked her, what's the number one piece of advice you'd give any young artist today? And her response was, be patient. I think when we look at, what can happen on TikTok and something suddenly has a cultural moment and explodes, or a video has a cultural moment and explodes, or, Childish Gambino drops a powerful song like This Is America and, we all see it in short order. That can happen, but that's not the norm, right? Your career could take a while to blossom. A book I use in the classroom a lot from Ari Herstand, How to Make It in the New Music Business. His second volume is out now, and it's really good. He didn't just change the last chapter. He rewrote much of the book whole hog. And there's a whole section on the number of artists who really came into their own creatively later in life. Whether it's Leonard Cohen writing Hallelujah at age 49 or 50, whatever it is, or all these different things, it's not going to necessarily happen overnight. And I think a lot of my students have the perspective of like, oh my gosh, if I don't make it by the time I'm 23, it's over. So we have to be patient. And we also have to learn and grow and not just focus on the art, but focus on commerce. One of the most helpful things that I sort of did out of a gut reaction around this time, 25 years ago, a young adult, my parents are like, you've got socks, you've got clothes, what do you want for Christmas? And I had just started interning in a recording studio, and I said, you know what, all the smart people over there, they seem to read Billboard magazine. They think that's valuable. They're reading Pro Sound News. Maybe I should get subscriptions to those. So my parents got me a subscription to Billboard 25 years ago, and reading that periodical every single week without fail for over 2 decades has made me smarter. I know more people. I'm aware of more ideas. I've learned from more interviews and all the profiles in those pages. And it's not just, Billboard. It's, read Hypebot every day. Read Music Business Worldwide every day. Dive into the micro communities. Michael Brandfold and Jay Gilbert have a podcast called the Music Biz Weekly Podcast. And they were just saying, there's lots of really robust creative conversations happening in Facebook groups. What Facebook groups are aligned or adjacent to some of your passions? Join them. And it's so silly. You're like, oh my gosh, someone's telling me Facebook group, but they're right. You can learn, you can network, you can share opinions. I'm in the Audio Nerds Facebook group in the Twin Cities, the Synth Meetup in the Twin Cities, and I learn a ton. I mean, there's things for sale, there's people asking for advice, there's people celebrating, I found this new plugin, I found this new platform, hey, there's a sale on this thing, or, you really can start at a small level. And I explained this to a class today. There's less and less and less professional knowledge that you need to know that I can teach you to move your life forward. Right? There's no book that I can say, read this book and you're guaranteed a job. So in lieu of that, it's more and more professional practice. What do professionals do every day? They do this, Charlie. They talk to each other. They read. They network. They learn. And they don't doom scroll on Twitter. They follow all their industry colleagues on Twitter, and they follow the leaders of industry on Twitter and social media, not just for cat and dog pictures, but to learn something. What's happening in the moment, because the future is being written now, right? And so you've got to pay attention to both making your art and moving in the world of capitalism and commerce. And the same is true for, it's funny, we think music's unique, but look at running a restaurant. Running a restaurant is only partially based on, are you a good cook or not? Right? Everyone realizes that the restaurant business is a lot more than having a great recipe. It's ordering systems and it's inventory and it's management and it's aesthetics and it's the same for our creative careers too.
So what you're saying is that there are some positive aspects of social networking. Surprisingly, this is like really hot news off the press. Yeah, I mean you've had a number of what I would call careers in your life, even though they've all kind of been maybe in a similar sector. When you were going through, like when you were making slight changes of like going from playing more to recording more to doing more sort of like business things to doing more teaching, what was going on in your head in those times? Were any of those calculated decisions? Were you just kind of going with the flow? Were they gut feelings? And did you ever have that moment? Did you have any moments of like, okay, I'm not playing as much anymore, I feel weird or bad about that, or I'm not recording as much anymore, I feel, did you have were any of those kind of like, were those transitions just fine, or were some of them kind of like more painful or more confusing?
Transition and change is always painful. And to answer the top of the question, no. Very little of that was calculated. There was a great article in the Harvard Business Review a year or two ago, and it's like, rules for business. Number 1, be paranoid. Right? Yeah. And that's really great. I mean, to go back to sort of, I did burn out on the road, and I hated being a traveling musician, and I didn't know what to do. And I started asking a whole bunch of friends, and I bought a whole bunch of people coffee. Club owners that I had met, artist managers that I had met, being in, the 5-6 day a week gigging bar band type of thing. Like, you're all older than me. You all seem to have more stable income than me. How did you get where you're at? Can I buy you a coffee and talk about that? And everybody said yes. Why? Because I bet somebody bought coffee for them, or they bought coffee for somebody, and it moved their lives forward 20 years prior. So I knew I didn't want to be on the road, but I didn't know where that would land. That ended up leading into a studio internship that led into a studio job. But then, the engineer and a bunch of us from the studio were out at the bar drinking, and were probably overserved. And our engineer, who was younger than all of us, is like, this Pro Tools is going to be a big deal. Right? And we drunkenly made the decision to max out our credit cards and deplete the studio's bank account and buy one of the state of Minnesota's first 24IO Pro Tools TDM rigs. It wasn't a spreadsheet, and my dad's like, well, you got to have a spreadsheet and you got to have charts and a pros column and a negative column and you build it. Yes, that's smart. But this was much more of a gut check, Brian, our engineer's like, I see things going this way and there's a lot of art, we might want to invest in that. And then suddenly, because we were one of the only systems like that in the area, we were booked solid for months in advance. And then the whole thing fell apart less than 2 years later when the Digi-001 came out. And that's when I started to be paranoid, right? I went from, you can book time with us. We'd love to make your record in March to tomorrow's open. Do you want to come in tomorrow? We'd love to have you tomorrow. Tomorrow? Would you like to come in tomorrow? At half the rate we charged a year ago? And you realize that there's so much going on in the world that you're not in control of, right? I was an avid Pro Tools user, but I wasn't sitting there in the boardroom about to release, Pro Tools LE, an $800 or $1,000 version of the, somewhere someone is making software right now that will make you obsolete. How are you going to fight against that, right? And how can you shift and dodge? And some of them are also, life decisions. You get older, you have a family. I don't have the energy and the patience to sit in the chair and, record bands like I used to. I can't be up till midnight while somebody works on the 30th vocal take of a song. That could be a beautiful song, and I want artists to be recording until 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, 5 in the morning tonight, but it's past my time to do that. So, that transitioned me into, the commercial world, audio for post-production, for brands and licensing and all those sort of things. And that also gave me another facet of the industry that said, wow, you can get a 5-figure check for putting your song in a television commercial. You can get a 5-figure check for doing this with your art. And that further opened my aperture to what a creative career could be, which is partly what pushed me back in the classroom. Hey, there's a lot of exciting opportunities, young creatives, that we often don't see. It's easier to pursue just about any creative path today, but most of those creative paths will be anathema to what we perceived were good jobs 10, 20 years ago. When, you look at what the Fortune 500 used to be 50 years ago, and now Tesla is worth more than Walmart, right? And how long have we lambasted Tesla and wondered when are they going under? And they were founded in 2003, I believe. So a 17-year-old company is now worth more than all of our auto manufacturers combined, as well as one of our largest global retailers. Apple, that would have been on the verge of bankruptcy when you and I were in college, Charlie, is now the world's first $2 trillion company. And they're pivoting as the product cycle changes, they're pivoting into content and services and making just as much money. I'm probably rambling, and people listening to this are going to be like, he's a crazy person. Charlie should have on less crazy people.
Smart but crazy. Crazy like a smart fox.
The world is going to continue to change faster and faster and faster, whether we like it or not. And the only reason I pay attention to trends is simple self-interest and self-preservation. I've lost my job so many times that I now look over my shoulder every day or every hour or every 15 minutes, and also looking at what's the life raft or lily pad that you could float out to get to another wider open expanse of potential. What little thing could you launch and demo and beta that could grow into something real? For digital creatives, beta testing new products and services and content doesn't cost anything, at a marginal level because you have the production capacity in your laptop. So, I don't know. I'm an optimist, And this year has been hard, but a lot of people are making great things, and a lot of smart companies are pivoting in interesting ways, and a lot of artists are learning to use technology in incredibly powerful directions. You know, the Beatles didn't invent multi-track recording. Michael Jackson didn't invent MTV. Lady Gaga didn't have to invent YouTube. Those are all unique artists that recognized the power of a technology or a platform and decided to use it in sort of a creative way. Les Paul wanted to stack himself, and so he worked on his Ampex machines to have multi-track recording. I don't know if he necessarily jumped, he wanted to stack Mary Ford's vocals. I don't know if he jumped to the fact that a pop band was going to bring in a harpsichord and sample loops and whatever, and build the White Album, right? So I see a lot of that going on, and that's exciting. And I pay attention and try to teach my students to pay attention on a daily, hourly level, because that's the future. The future's happening right now. It's not, how did business work a decade ago? How did business work 5 years ago? When I started teaching, I was telling students how to get CDs on consignment to a major retailer like Best Buy. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Looking forward while looking over the shoulder. What's going to take me out?
This time of year, it's like vampires, definitely. 100% vampires.
Right, exactly.